giving myself that same grace, right? Like I did the best I could with the tools I had at the time. So like I was somebody who had been in an active eating disorder for 5 years by the time that she got sick. And then I was in school trying to just get through in a situation that was really bad. Like, so I lost my mother when I was 20 to breast cancer. And she had been sick since my sophomore year of college. So when I was 19, I still remember it. I was in my college dorm, and you know how, like, this is aging me, but there was a phone on the wall and you had to get a phone call. And it was my dad, and or maybe it was the both of them. I mean, it's weird because I've been thinking a lot about this in advance of this call, and a lot of it I just don't remember. Like it's just a blur to me, you know. Like I'm just like was that when that? But in any event, I do remember this. I got a call, and she had already had her surgery. She had already had her mastectomy, so that was the first I knew of it. That you know, they said she had breast cancer. She had a mastectomy. She's out of surgery. She's fine. And yeah, I mean, it was October. So I had just gotten to school for my sophomore year. And I kind of feel like I said, well, what should we do? You know, do I go home? And my father, both of them actually were very much education oriented. Like they're just like, no, absolutely not. You stay there, you do your thing. She's fine. She's going to have chemo and radiation and she'll be fine. That was kind of crazy. And then went home for Thanksgiving, I think. And she had already kind of lost her hair. And like the whole thing was just so awful. It's upsetting to even think. I mean, it's so far ago, you know, but it's still upsetting to think about it. Anyway, so that was that. And then so she had her chemo and radiation, and I was home for, I guess, you know, I don't know, Thanksgiving, Christmas, went back to school. We all just kind of like carried on. And that next summer, I feel like she had a reoccurrence on her chest wall. And then my junior year, I stayed home for a semester my junior year, and she was still sick. I was also struggling. I was struggling myself. I had a really bad eating disorder in high school, and I was drinking and eating and binging a lot in college, as you do, you know. And so I was putting on a lot of weight in school, and I was just struggling just across the board. You know what I mean? My mother was sick. I was completely sick myself. Like I just was like barely getting through, you know. And so I decided I was going to stay home my fall semester of my junior year. And she was home and I was home, but it wasn't like, I mean, it's weird because I've been listening to your other guests, and, you know, it wasn't like I was like home there for her, you know, it wasn't like that. Like we were very much like, I think as a family, just in denial about the whole thing. Like it was just like, this is happening. She's not going to die. We're going to get through it. But each thing that would happen would be like another thing. So I was at home for my junior year, fall semester of my junior year. Then I went back to school, and then I went home for the summer before my senior year. And she had been just not great, but it wasn't like anybody, you know, we were all just like forging ahead with everything that was happening.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I was supposed to be taking I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. Like I was supposed to be taking my LSATs because I was going to go to law school, and I was taking that Kaplan course, you know, you take, and like, and like I was doing that, and she was down at Duke for her checkup. And I remember my brother so I'm the youngest of four, right? And my sister was at medical school. My other sister's a doctor. She was doing her residency. And then my brother is a lawyer and he was in Chicago. We were all kind of spread out. And so I heard somehow that she had gone down for a checkup and it appeared that the cancer had spread again. So this is the summer before my senior year. It's like maybe, I don't know, 18 months into her diagnosis. And I said, well, gosh, I should come down. But my dad's like, you have your Kaplan class. I mean, it's like unbelievable. So I had my Kaplan class and I was doing that. And my brother was in Connecticut with his wife. He was married. And so they came down, scooped me up, and we drove down to Duke. It was 8 hours, like that 8-hour trip. And by the time I got down there, she was in a coma.
What?
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was just so fucked up.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was just like this weird, like fever dream. I mean, I look back now and it was just like, it seems like it was so long, but then it was also really, really like, but by the time it happened, it was super quick. So I guess, again, I don't really remember. That's what's so messed up. Like I was at home trying to hold down the fort, taking care of the animals and stuff. And she was at Duke. And the last conversation we had was horrible. She was like on me about something, that I was supposed to be doing, or I was supposed to go to church to see somebody. And I was just like, God, just lay off, and she was worried about stuff that was happening at home. And then, yeah, it's just really bad.
Yeah. That is really hard. Like, I guess I'm curious, back to the sophomore year, that phone call, what was said to you? Like, how did you react to that? It sounded like it was not just, hey, this is stage 1. We're just going to do a mastectomy and everything's okay. Was it already progressed at that point?
I have no idea. That's what's even weirder. Like, I don't even know. Like, I don't know if they had at the time. You probably know more about, I mean, your wife died of breast cancer, correct?
She did. Yeah.
Yeah. So right. There's so many more markers now, than there were then. Like, it just was, I don't recall understanding the different levels of stuff that was happening. And I think also just as the youngest, and the fact that my sisters were doctors, like, I just was kind of like, what? I don't, and I was also so messed up myself in my own head with my own struggles.
Yeah. That's a lot to add to the plate.
Yeah.
Was there ever any conversations as a family, or, hey, this is what's happening, or, hey, like, this is how we're going to support each other? Or
no.
Like you said, everybody was just kind of pushing through. It was like, literally just like, let me be blind to this.
I don't know. I mean, it's funny because I know that I don't want to say anything that, like, sometimes I feel like I didn't hear stuff that happened, because sometimes I feel like I don't remember. Like, I wouldn't want to say those conversations didn't happen, because maybe if you talk to my family, they'd be like, oh yeah, no, they totally happened. We had these meetings. But I just feel like it was very much about, we're just pushing through. Like, we're just going to push through. Mom's going to be fine. We're going to get through this. And literally, like, that is how it has been. Like, that's how it was. Like, it was just, even after she died, it was like, okay, Miriam, you go back to your senior year. Do not stay home. I mean, it was really kind of a disaster from my perspective. And
it just never happened almost.
Yeah. Yeah. And she was
everything was fine.
She was like straight up the center of the family. I mean,
100%.
Okay. Like, she was like what we all revolved around. And so I think it was almost like, just like everything kind of blew up in a weird way, And so, I mean, we're not close, but it's just like we all were left to deal, like,
right.
Yeah.
And like, really, I think because my siblings were all in kind of like super high pressure roles, maybe they were able to like just kind of focus in on work and just really, you know, deal with in that way and kind of move forward. But I was just a little bit left like, what the fuck? Like, what am I supposed to do now? Because most of my, I think this is the other thing that I feel like I've been reflecting on quite a bit. Like a lot of my struggles in my teen years and, you know, being anorexic and, you know, I was very oppositional because I was the one who didn't do what I was supposed to do. And I was never allowed to do what I wanted to do. And I was supposed to be like, you know, my parents were very strict. And so I blame my mother for a lot of stuff. Like I was like, she's not letting me do this and she's not letting me do that. And that's not fair. And da 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 da. And so it was almost like all I wanted to do was get away and go away to school to just do my own thing and be like, do what I wanted to do. And so when I got to school and I did that and I kind of was trying to like separate out, you know, and then this kind of happened my, you know, like I said, my sophomore year. And then that was my whole college time, which sucked.
Yeah. When she was sick through the, I guess, 3/4 of your college, or at least the initial college, were you still present to the fact that you were like trying to break away to become your own thing? Or did you now feel guilty about having those thoughts?
Yeah, to a certain extent. You know what I mean? Like, I think that I didn't want to acknowledge that she was so sick. And so I remember my sister at one point saying something to the effect of like, but then I was also like so unwell mentally myself, you know, and I remember at one point my sister said something like, you know, you're not sick, mom's sick. Like I was kind of struggling, but it was just like, it had to take a back seat to what was going on with mom. I mean, it's so obvious, like, and yet I couldn't show up for her because I was so fucked up myself, which you know, has me feeling a lot of regret, you know, and
well, but at the same time, they weren't making it feel like it was as bad as it might have been. So it was kind of hard to even realize, like, you know, even in, you know, I relate in the sense that my stepmom was then diagnosed with cancer like a month before I moved to London. And I really did have this thing. I was like, fuck, like, should I be on the other side of the, like, you know, I was living in Atlanta, like, okay, it's a direct flight. It's like 3 a day, a little bit easier and like, you know, what's it going to be? $500. Whereas like, if I needed to come home on like a last minute thing, that's like very hard to get back to. Yeah. But, you know, like my parents were like, my stepmom was like, no, go, like, I'll be fine. And I then like, I don't even know how long it was into like being there, but I got a photo of her and like my brother and my dad, and she was completely bald. And I had like never, like, I did not know, like, I knew that she was going to go through chemo. Like, I knew that was like probably a thing that would happen, but like seeing the photo, like, cause I hadn't been there, I was like, holy fuck, like she's like sick, like she is not doing well. But they really did, like, I feel like they didn't want, and I don't know if this was like what your parents were kind of like hoping, you know, to do. And obviously there's like a good and a bad to all these things, but they didn't want you to like worry about it because they wanted you to be at school and do, you know, finish school and blah, blah, blah. Right. You know what I mean? Like, they probably did it in a sense that was like, well, they were trying to do the best they could, but actually in reality, it made it very hard for you to process what you were going through on top of having that. And then your siblings not realizing that, like, you didn't even realize it was as bad as it was. Like, they have medical degrees. Of course they know it's like probably fucking terrible.
Yeah. I don't know. You know, it's weird because we don't even, like, I think a couple of things about that. And I hear what you're saying. I think it's, you know, as you can imagine, my family was very oriented around like achievement and like staying on track and like getting the next thing done. And so I think part of it was just like, you know, and my mother was as well. And so she would have been like, no, you do not get off track. Like, like that would have been a disaster to like, lose time kind of thing. And then I think I wouldn't underestimate, I guess I don't imagine that maybe my sisters were like, maybe they did, maybe they knew it was worse than it was, but I don't know that, we never really talked about it. Like
right.
It just was one of those things where it was just like, I think it was too horrible to contemplate. So it was almost, we didn't even go there.
Do you feel like there was it led by your mom or your dad in terms of like not wanting to talk about it? Because there's been, so I'm in a men's cancer group. I'm in a men's breast cancer group, meaning it's men who are supporting their wives.
Yes.
Okay. And I see story after story of like these men who are just completely devastated, and they're like, my wife won't even admit that she's dying and we cannot talk about her cancer, which creates like a very challenging situation because then you can't process. And like, no shade, like I don't know how I would process it. I was very lucky in that Ariana, my wife, we openly talked about it. We talked about it with the kids. Like it was always a thing where each new stage, like we always had those conversations. And it's interesting to hear you say like, you don't know if you had them and you don't remember, because I've asked my kids and it's only been 3 years and they're still like, yeah, I don't remember that conversation. I'm like, you don't remember the night we told you that your mom's like not going to make it through Christmas? So for me, I have a photo of it though, and I'm like, we fucking told you, see? But it is like our minds, it is our mind's protection. But I'm just curious if like, if it was like your dad couldn't handle it, or if your mom couldn't, or maybe both couldn't, because like, what was that like after she passed? Like, were you able to find support in your family with everything you were dealing with too?
Oh
like,
God,
that feels really challenging to me.
Yeah, no, I think it, again, I almost feel like it's kind of weird because as I've been talking about doing this interview, I've been thinking to myself, I really should try to go back and like have some conversation, because obviously it's still, I mean, literally this is like ages ago. I mean, ages, but I think that it was my mother who didn't want to talk about it. I have that feeling, but I don't know that to be true. And I also think that my father, he lost his father when he was 12, and he's very, you should have, actually, he doesn't remember because he has cognitive decline, but I was you could have him on the show.
Yeah. And all your siblings. We can just get everyone talking.
all the white.
And then we'll get the stories for you. Exactly. We'll get the facts straight for
you. Exactly. So no, I think he is super duper. I think in a way, like he is super duper practical. Like he is just like, he's like, yeah, that happened. Like, I think in a way he's a little bit shut down emotionally, because of that. And so I think the combination of those two things, it was more like she did not want to acknowledge it. He was just like, we are pressing forward. Everybody else was like, we are pressing forward. And that was just that was that.
Yeah. That's, yeah.
Exactly.
And I mean, I appreciate you being so open about it, because like my heart is just kind of a little bit breaking a little bit to hear that, because it's so fucking hard. And I, even though like what I went through was devastating, I still feel so much gratitude for the way that it all worked out. And even where you talked about like you guys, after she died, everybody kind of went and did their own thing. Like in a smaller version of that happened with me and my kids, where like the devastation, it just blew us up. And while like I was surviving and like they were eating and they had clothes, we all kind of went separate ways for a little bit in whatever way that like, 8-year-olds and 12-year-olds can do. But then like we're now like I would say this year we're actually finding our way back to each other, where it's like, oh, we're our family now. And that was largely because of everything that I've done to try to grow in my ability to handle my grief.
Sure.
But I'm curious, like after your mom passes, you're back at school, and then you have to go out into the world and become a quote unquote adult, and you're still struggling with this. So like, to me, like I'm imagining this really challenging situation where, one, you don't have a supportive environment for whatever reason. Two, you lose your mom, and then you're carrying this potential guilt, and you're dealing with your mental health and the things that you've been struggling with. What does it look like to proceed forward after?
Oh, God. Well, I guess immediately after she died, we all drove out to Illinois, which is where my parents are from. And that was a crazy thing too. Like I remember sitting in the car and we were just, I still can't really, like, I don't know what we were all, I just remember I was listening to like Crosby, Stills and Nash, like Southern Cross over and over again. Like I still, like on my Walkman, you know? And,
oh yes.
And then we went out to, you know, Illinois. So like that was done. Right. And then, but everybody then had to go. Like my sister, Sarah she was in the military medical. Well, no, she had been in the military medical school. So she was now in the military. And so she had to go and do what she had to do. Allison was back in med school. Like she had to do her thing. Brant, he's the oldest. He was already married. So he like went and did his thing. So I came back with my dad to Allentown, which is where we're from, and just spent the rest of the summer doing, I don't even know what. Like, honestly, I don't know what I did. I don't know what I did. I do know that like my binging at that point was really, really, really bad. Like, I think I just didn't process anything. Like I just was in my own kind of illness and just used that as like, you know, a way to avoid everything. And so to answer your question, I went back to school and I still don't remember. I feel like I'm like, but I don't remember. I mean, I did my senior year, like, but it was bad. Like it was really bad. I was like very, very thin when I got to school because I had been anorexic. And when I graduated, I had gained like 100 pounds from my freshman year to my senior year. And I just felt like shit. Every single day. I felt like shit. I don't know how I graduated because I hadn't, like, I really don't. I don't understand it, but I did. And to finally answer your question, I went to an eating disorder treatment center that summer after my college.
Okay. Yeah. And that was all self-directed?
Pretty much. I mean, it was just, I needed to do something because I just was like not functional at all. And so, yeah, and that was the beginning of, you know, a long, long process of getting better.
In that dealing with the eating disorder, when did the grief come up in that part of that healing?
I don't know. That's what's so weird. Like, that's why I feel like, honestly, when I was thinking about being on here, I was like, I don't even know what I'm going to talk about. Like, I think that I really it's almost like, you know how like they say when you're an addict, like your emotional development stops when you become, it feels like that. Like, it feels like that was what was going on. Like I wasn't able to process emotions, including grief or otherwise, all the time that I was really in it, you know? And so I think certain things have happened since, you know, I've been older. I mean, I think things will happen where I'll lose something and I'll have like a kind of an outsized reaction to it. Like when I had to leave my dog in Colorado when I moved to London, like I was like a basket case.
I would be a basket case.
Yeah. And so it's kind of like, I feel like it comes out. And then also, you know, I've done a ton. I mean, like a ridiculous amount of therapy. And so I think that's part of how, I mean, really, like, honest to God, like a ridiculous amount. But, you know, that's what it is. And I'm kind of the person in my family that does therapy. Like nobody else really does. And so yeah, everybody else seems to be just getting along fine.
I mean,
they're definitely not.
But they're definitely not. No. no judgments on them, but
truly though, everybody else has gotten married, have kids, they've like moved their life forward. And for a long, long time, I was kind of stuck.
Interesting. What did it feel like to be stuck?
And what did it feel like to be stuck? Just like a failure, like a loser, just like untapped potential, it's like, I just didn't have, it's ironic actually, because it was like my mother's big fear was that I would get off track of like the achievement wheel. Right. And I in fact did. I moved out after I was home for a year, I was home with my dad, which was miserable. Just me and my dad in our house, our huge house. And I ended up going out to Yellowstone for a summer with a childhood friend. And that's how I got out to Colorado. And then for, most of my 20s, I did like waitressing jobs. I worked at a daycare. I didn't have like a job for quite some time.
And so this was after you graduated. Then you moved home with your dad. Then you went to Yellowstone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you did that.
Yeah. 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 So it just feels like I don't know whether anybody else, last night I was thinking about it and I just was so angry, I just feel so angry about it, it just was so unfair, but I also don't want to feel self-pity. Like because there's no point in that either, but it definitely is something that was, obviously a big impact on my life. Yeah. But there's also, I'm sure there's good that's come out of it too. Like I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't know the people I do. I wouldn't have the emotional life that I do. But yeah, I think it's a good argument for, staying present to what is in the moment, and not trying to push through.
Yeah. Yeah. We have to just let those things be. I mean, I definitely still have so many moments of just anger. It's anger either at like, why is this my situation? Anger, like, why did I have to lose her? Mm-hmm. Like, the only thing I wanted in life was to grow old with her. Or anger of like, why the fuck do I have to be the single parent? Right. Why do I have to date? Why do I have to, why? I know. Or like anger at other people of like, fuck you and your advancement at work. I'm like stuck taking care of my dying wife, or like, now I'm the single parent and I can't fucking do what you can do. And like, fuck all of you. So like, there's definitely anger that still comes up, which is usually followed by tears, which is followed by sadness, which is then followed by laughter. Like, it's just this weird, like, at times I feel manic because I'm just like, okay, we're like laughing 1 minute and then I'm crying the next. And I've never felt like I'm one who can compartmentalize, but I've realized that the more I'm able to hold my grief or expand that ability to hold it as I heal, and I think healing is maybe the wrong term for what we go through. I think it's just that expansion. I have learned that, like, I have learned to see like these very healthy ways of, okay, I still feel really broken today, but I'm going to engage with my kids, or I'm going to engage in life and kind of just put this up here for a minute. Yeah. And then maybe like tonight I'm going to come back to it. So I and that's what frustrates me with this whole thing of like time-based healing for grief. And kind of like the reason why like me and Ashley started this, or like why I want all these stories to get out there, is because like there's no fucking thing as time-based healing. Like you can have somebody go 20 years and that does not mean that they healed from their grief or that they've moved forward in any capacity. Like they could have numbed out to it, or they didn't do the work, or a million other reasons. Yeah. So just because like somebody's 6 months versus 20 years, like, I hate that we place judgments on these things of like, well, it's been a year, you should be good now, right? Like, why?
No. Yeah.
What the fuck? No, not at all.
Yeah.
But we do that as a society. And I think it's because we don't know how to handle it. We don't know how to handle something that will never go away.
Well, there is one aspect, which is like, as the years have gone on, like, what is it? Like your ability to just, well, I don't know, there is a time aspect to it. But I think that like distance, what we have to like, it's not that I'm okay, or it's not that it's better, or it's like nothing is okay about the fact that my mom died when I was 9. Nothing is okay about that. My life was literally changed or maybe it wasn't changed because everything happens for a reason or whatever the fuck they say. But like, but like I know what life is like without a mom. Like you know what I mean? Like I know that I like don't go to like Target and like peruse the aisles with my mom, or like we don't go and get pedicures. Like that's just not a thing. Like aside from the fact that I have a stepmom who I can do that with, but like the point is that it's not your mom. Like that's something different.
Correct.
Like I know that like there's like my mom is not going to be at my wedding or there when I have a kid. Like I just know that. Like this is not a fucking surprise to me. So like I already kind of am preparing myself, or like, you know, like that just looks different in my world than it looks like, you know, my one friend like recently got married and everyone's like, how the fuck did you plan that wedding? She was like, my mom. And I was like, well, great. I'm going to be fucked. Like, good thing I plan events for a living because I ain't got no mom to help me with that. Like, but like, like there is like a time thing where like, okay, like one more, like here's just yet another like milestone thing that like she's not here for. I've dealt with them for 20 years. Like I know what it's like. It brings up the emotions again and things. So there is like a time thing to it. But I think what we assume, or what like some people assume, because I won't put that on everyone, is that it's like a broken leg. And like, and in a way, actually, I guess it kind of is, because like your broken leg is really never the same. Like you probably never really run like as fast as you did before you broke your leg 3 times. Like, but so I think there's just like, it's just a misunderstanding that like you get over it. I feel like
but like to challenge that though. You say time, but what I'm hearing is it's the experiences that you've had to have those triggers and to know how to handle them. And that you could have numbed out to all those experiences, or there could have been circumstances in your life that you avoided to not have that experience, to develop the ability to handle that situation. And also the sense that like right here, like you, like Miriam, like it's still like so visceral for you to talk about this. Like there are still moments where I could talk about it and I immediately start crying. Like that happens over and over with people who have had a significant loss, especially at a young age. So I think it's that idea that like that heaviness goes away with time. But it's like experience allows us to handle that heaviness, and not necessarily that it's going to go away.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's complicated too when there is regret, you know, and I think, and like all of those messy emotions, like regret and anger and guilt and shame, you know, like there's, you were mentioning, Ashley, just all of those milestone events. And I think I've been thinking a lot about like, you know, like, is it an attachment to think that like your mom should be at your wedding? Like that we all have ideas of what things should be, right? This should not be the way it is. But it is. So it's like, how do we reconcile? Like, I'm like, I shouldn't have had to deal with that. Like, and that's what pisses me off. And like, you shouldn't have lost your wife and you shouldn't have lost your mom, but like, and yet it happened. So like, I sometimes feel like I'm just like not built right, like to be able to be like, you know, accepting of this, you know, and or accepting of like what impacts it may have had on my life and how my life unfolded. And it just, I don't know, it definitely is like it's the one thing I can say is you can only understand it if you've been through it. You know, because like the people that have like the life that goes exactly the way, quote unquote, things are supposed to, you know, like you were saying earlier, I find myself kind of just, sometimes I'm like, ugh, fuck you, you know, like it's just like, good for you. Like, that's great.
Exactly. That's right.
Like, you know, even to have a mother that you like want to hang out with, you know, and like, it's just like, it just is so messy. It just can get so messy. And so I think working on accepting what is, I think is where I am right now, is just being like, and that's a tall order in general for me. Like, you know, as opposed to just being like, well, I should be living in a different flat, or I should have had children, or I should be married, or I should this, or I should that, you know, all that shit is just,
that's a good point.
It's all part of it, I guess. I don't know.
It's the radical acceptance.
Yeah.
Like, can we radically accept the way things are without applying judgments?
Sometimes I'm like, maybe, but then other times I'm like, absolutely not. Like, this is not fair. It's not fair at all. And, you know, you won't ever be able to convince me that is fair. Like, I don't know. It is interesting though. But I mean, do you guys feel like, I do think though, I mean, when I'm again, and it's also comparison of like how other people have managed it. I'm so grateful you guys are doing this because it definitely is an opportunity to just listen to everybody's experience. And of course, I resonate with the people, you know, who like, I feel like there are certain instances, I'm trying to think, you know, where families just band together and they're like, we are here for each other. And this is going to be, you know, and I feel envious of that, quite honestly. Like, the sister who stayed home and was there, and they spent every, you know, possible minute together. And I'm just like, wow, I didn't do that at all. Like that. And I feel ashamed of that. I'm guilty about it.
I think that goes back to the should and like the comparisons, which I feel like that is something like I've actually probably like not learned or like been experiencing like more lately. And maybe that's because like I've got into a relationship and it's like, you just point out like there's things where like, especially on the internet, it's like, oh, if it red flags and this, that, and the other. And it's like, there's so many things that are just like, wait, but like you're literally melding, like you're living with like another human being who has like their own shit. Like there's like nothing ever looks the same. You can't compare yourself to like if your boyfriend does this or if your boy, like obviously there are a few things like if your boyfriend punches you in the face, that's like not okay. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's, but I think it comes like, it is the comparison of like, it just looks different.
That's a good red flag.
Yeah, a good red flag.
You're out of here.
Definitely address that.
The PSA podcast.
But like, I don't know that I was like, I feel like very similar to you in that sense. Like there's a lot of things where like we were there for my mom. Like, we were so young. Like, I don't even know, like, I didn't like, in some cases, I probably didn't realize that she was like as sick as she was. Like, I remember she had a backache and then it was like, she was like dead. Like, you know, like the continuum of like her being sick was like, she did go into remission and like my brother and sister were born. And like, so I don't really remember the first time she was sick, but I definitely remember like the second time or like, so like, it is really hard to compare like death experiences or experiences at large. And I think that a lot of that like is what kills us personally, like is because it's like, I should have done this, or it's that should have game, or it's like the at least thing that we kind of talked about recently, CJ, you know, like at least this, or at least that. It's like, no, like this is just a shitty situation.
Right.
Like, we don't want anyone losing their parent before they're supposed to die, I guess, which I can,
or even what that means.
Yeah. I think but it's hard. It's interesting now because a lot of my friends are losing parents now at my age. And, you know, I think it's hard. It's hard at any age. And, you know, some have said, you know, gosh, I didn't realize, like, I knew that you lost your mom, but they didn't really get like what kind of impact that would have, you know, until they actually lost. And as I was thinking too about, speaking of relationships, what's interesting is like, I feel like I've heard more than not, like people get together, like my current boyfriend lost his dad when he was 19. And I know, Ashley, your guy also lost a parent. And I feel like I've heard on the show, like a lot of people have gotten together. And it's just so interesting to me because I don't know whether that's just anecdotally.
I just think it's like we find the same trauma bonds.
Yeah.
Honestly, and you can relate easier. Or, you know, there's at least, I guess, in the widow community or with my experiences, it became very hard to relate to anybody.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole host of things that could go together with that. It's interesting. I've never dated somebody who's been a widow. So that maybe is something there. But I do think it's this whole idea of like, we have this inherent need in us as humans to make comparisons, to know either one, to be like, hey, mine's worse than yours, so give me the love and attention, or mine's not as bad as yours, so I should deny myself these emotions. And it really like comes back down to like these judgments, right? Like, like you said, Ashley, the should and the at least, as opposed to just like, hey, it is what it is. Like everybody who has been on this show has had a really fucking shitty situation, and they have shared how they've gotten through that situation. And the goal is like, do I relate to something that they have gone through, whether it's the same situation or not, that can help me in my life? And we actually had like an instance where I think it was the most recent one, where she told her sons like came at her of like, how long do I have to keep playing piano for my dead dad?
Oh, right.
And literally we recorded it. I walked upstairs and I told my kids, I'm like, you don't have to play violin anymore, because that was something that they had with my wife. So it's just like these kind of like little things that I'm just like, oh, it gave me permission to be like, I'm allowed to let that go. And I'm not hurting my kids. As a matter of fact, I'm probably helping them to not play something that they don't want to do that reminds them of their dead fucking mother. So, but you know, I guess to bring it back to your story, I'm curious what your relationship.
Sometimes we go off on tangents.
It was really good. It was a super interesting discussion. But I'm really curious about what your relationship to your grief was through your 20s, where you were, you know, doing these different, you know, types of jobs and kind of just like going through this and healing from the eating disorders. Like, what was your relationship to grief? Or was it nothing? And then in your 30s, something started to happen?
You know, I mean, obviously it's still present for me, right? Like, but I think that as I became more well, I was better able to access my own emotions, including my feelings about my mom. Because I really had a lot of anger toward both my parents about being so ill in high school and not getting any treatment. When I was in high school. And, you know, and so, but I mean, from their perspective, I'm sure they, you know, they would say that, you know, I was like that typical anorexic that was just like, I'm fine. I don't want any, you know, leave me alone. Da, 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 da. And so it wasn't, but like for a long time, I was very angry with both my parents because of what I felt as their lack of ability to deal with what was going on with me, and then the fallout that had for the rest of my, you know, life.
But they were like in denial a little bit.
Yeah. So I guess denial is probably a theme of this show.
Yeah. But, that'll be in the title.
No.
Denial with Miriam. I'm kidding.
God. I mean, honestly,
shoulds, denials, and at least.
I think honestly, like I think about my siblings listening to this, like I don't even know what they would think. Like it's kind of crazy to think about it, but you know, who knows? Like maybe it'll spark a conversation. But I think, you know, it's hard to deal with hard things. Like that's just the bottom line. And if you are interested in like moving forward and kind of pretending like things are fine, then that is going to have a fucking backlash at the end of the day. That's just going to, so anyway, to answer your question. So my 20s, I was, you know, doing stupid jobs, still full on eating disorder, drinking a ton, you know, just not even dealing at all, really. And, you know, kind of feeling like a loser, you know, and then I just kind of gradually like pulled my shit together and, you know, and look at me now. But I mean, that's, exactly. You know, look at me. That's what my boyfriend's always like, look at you now.
I love that.
But no, I mean, the one thing I can say is that I have been able to be, you know, prove to myself fairly resilient, like in terms of like dealing, like and getting, you know,
Yeah.
But I mean, in retrospect, like I say, I wish things had been different. You know, I like even school, you know, like when I was at school, you know, Duke won the championship, right? In basketball. And it was like, people are like, oh my God, you must have had the most amazing time. Like, and I feel like ashamed. Like, I'm like, well, actually, it was a fucking shit show. Like, my mother was sick. She died. I was a mess. I mean, I just feel like it was like, and that's where that anger comes. Like, I'm like simultaneously like so regretful and also just really just like pissed, you know, that I wasted. Like, I feel like I wasted so much time. And I feel like part of it was my own fault and part of it was just circumstance, you know?
What would have been different if you didn't, quote unquote, waste time?
Well, it's that woulda, shoulda, coulda, right? Like if I had been like, you know, I don't know, gotten treatment in high school and then not gone to college until I was well. And then if my mom hadn't been sick, like, it's all that shoulda, woulda, like, and again, I was talking about that yesterday with my boyfriend. He's just like, that didn't happen. Like, why even spend time thinking about it? But I'm like, but no, like, I still have that idea of like what my life could have been. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is so, I don't know. I'm not going to feel bad about feeling bad about it, but like, it's just, sometimes there's a little bit of an existential thing too. I don't know, Ashley, if you either of you feel like this, I'm like, what's the point? Like, I feel like having that happen, I'm just like, what's the point? Like, we're all going to die anyway. Like, why bother? Yeah. But
that's been one of the hardest things to deal with, is the loss of the future. And then I've occasionally had moments where all of a sudden I'm like after my wife died, like I literally was just like, I can't conceive of a future. I can't even have a thought of what a future was. And it was just that same thing. I'm just like, well, who the fuck cares? Yeah. Why does it matter? And like, and I was actually, I told my therapist, it was my other therapist, and I was like, I've held it together for so fucking long, for my whole life. And then I held it together with her. And I'm like, I just want to go be destructive. I'm like, everything in me just wants to go burn everything down and do every bad decision, because I'm so fucking tired, because my wife did conceivably everything that she could, and she still got cancer and she still fucking died. So why does it matter? Yeah. And then like you get little glimpses where I'm like, oh, I can kind of see a future. And then that kind of goes away, and you're back left with this like existential crisis of like, who the fuck cares? What, it just doesn't fucking matter anymore. So I could definitely relate to that. Yeah, for sure.
That's interesting, because I always think that like, if you have, I mean, this is, you know, I always think it's because I'm not on my own, but I don't have children, right? So I always feel like, and I don't know how much of like what happened influenced that for me also, you know, like just, you know, I don't, it's hard to say, but I always feel like if you have children, then you're like, okay, there it is. Like, I always have that's my belief, or that's my fantasy about like, oh, well, then that would be the reason. That's the existential reason, you know, but I know that's not always true either, because people leave voluntarily when there's children involved. So it's not to get too like deep, but that, I mean, that's what we're talking about. Like, we're talking about life and death and like meanings of things. And so I think that's why it's so hard to have these kinds of conversations, you know, especially when they're not conversations that are generally had, right? Where there's not that level of emotional, that's the word I'm looking for. Like, when families don't practice to have like deep, meaningful, emotional, vulnerable conversations, it's almost like, why would you expect that would happen in a situation like this? Really?
That's a good point.
You know, it would be very odd if it were to happen, because it's like, this is like the highest stakes conversation you can have. And that's not going to be the first one that's like, oh, let's get
let's get down to it. What fucked you up in life?
You know what I mean? So it's like, it kind of makes sense. So in a way, it's just like, I think just as a culture, we're not I think we tend toward denial as opposed to, especially when it comes to death.
And afraid to have those conversations because we're afraid potentially, especially with kids, of like, well, you can't, like, you don't want to scare them, but it's like, they already know. Like my kids already knew that something was wrong, even if they couldn't communicate it.
Interesting.
Like from the
How
moment
did you know
that she got sick,
I don't know if I've heard that.
They could tell.
Yeah.
So they could tell intuitively, especially my daughter.
Uh-huh.
She knows even now, like now she 100% knows if something's wrong with me. And I guess I'm also trying not to be biased because I've always kind of had those deep conversations with my kids, just because that's just the nature of me.
Yeah, and it's
wanting
a generational
to have those conversations
thing too. Like,
but they were really young when my wife got diagnosed. But I'm like in the car picking them up from school and I'm bawling my eyes out on the front. And I know that like energetically is having an impact on them, where they can like understand that something is wrong. And in my experience, and this applies to really anybody in our life, if we feel, and we all have had this experience, regardless of like how in touch with our emotions we are or not, we can feel when something is off. We know when somebody is off. It's the reason why we ask, hey, are you okay? Or why we get mad at somebody. Like, we understand this. And when kids have this experience of like, daddy's smiling, but I don't feel like he's happy. And we tell them everything's fine. Now in their minds, they're like, oh, then I'm wrong. And what I feel is wrong. And they start to develop this sense of like, I can't trust myself. And that was my thesis. And that's why I've always, even before my wife was sick, was like, I will always tell my kids the truth, which is going to have ramifications. I understand. But for me, it's always, they will always know what's going on. And so we told them every step of the way what was happening. I tell them when I'm upset, I tell them why I'm upset. If I yell at them, I'll come back to them and tell them like, this is what you did, or this is what I did. And this is why, like, so it's just like extreme honesty to be able to have those conversations and to allow them to know that like, hey, you're right. You're feeling pissed off of me, or you're feeling like something's wrong with me. There is something wrong with me. And this is what it is.
It's you. Just kidding.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
It's not you, it's me.
No, I think that's so beautiful. And I think, if nothing else that this kind of experience can produce is it requires a level, like if you're going to delve into it, it requires a level of emotional honesty, and or emotional, like opening up with it. So it's, if I can say, I feel like I've been a super negative guest, but like, I do feel like,
no, I love it.
That I think, I want to be a coach, and I want to do something. Like, I feel like if I've gotten anything, it's the ability to understand, like, when people feel bad, and like help, just at least have empathy, like true understanding of that kind of thing, where, maybe in some cases others might not understand that. So I think, it in that way, it helps to feel connected to other people who have struggle with the same kinds of issues, and that feels like a sense of connection. And like I said, it's why I think what you're doing is so special, because it looks all different ways, and I think if nothing else, that's what this program is going to demonstrate, that depending on, the family system, depending on the individuals, like, it's going to be different for everybody.
That's right.
And that we all can acknowledge that, and
not neither is wrong.
Or be like, well, why are you not handling this? Like, why, your sister, like, like all those things that we do. It's like, well, we're actually different people, and my experience is a completely different experience. So,
and different perceptions too, right? And we're just like, I think the best thing we could do is just give each other permission to be like, that's your experience and that's how you're processing, without judging it.
Without judgment. There's our title. right there.
Exactly. Without judgment and all denial. But like, even my kids, I saw how they each processed. And that photo that I took when we told them, my two older were latched onto my wife, holding her, and my youngest was sitting, at a distance in a chair, just kind of very neutral face.
Really?
And for him, and like he's even admitted, he's like, I don't want to feel bad. So anytime anything bad, I don't want to feel bad. I would like try to talk to him. No, I'm good. I just don't want to feel bad. So it's like that, and that's going to shape his experience of that whole thing too. And I think that's what we don't realize. Like this conversation that we're having, we are each having, we each hear the words being spoken, but we're each having a very different experience as well, because it's all being filtered. It's what process is going on in your head, what thoughts are happening in your head, what is it that you're trying to communicate, like
your experience.
And I think we just have to give each other permission to be like, yeah, that was fucked up. So tell me what your experience was like.
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious about what was the turning point, or do you feel there was a turning point in your life where you were dealing with things in one way and then you started dealing with them in another?
No, I wouldn't say I could pinpoint a turning point. I think it was more like an accumulation of things, accumulation of hours of therapy and different programs. Like, part of it for me was about taking responsibility for my own experience and stopping playing the victim, stopping blame. Like I think I did, a program, a landmark program where part of it was around, like I called my dad and I just said, you know what, I've been blaming you and mom, for years. I mean, mind you, this is not like, this wasn't in my 20s. Like this, I had carried around that anger of like, they didn't take care of me when I was in high school. And as a result, everything got fucked. And so I had to say, you know what, that's acknowledge that they did, everybody does the best that they can do with what the tools that they have. Right. And, so I think, I guess to answer your question, I think the more that I was able to take responsibility for my own self and what I was doing and the choices I was making, I think that, over time became a way that I was more able to deal with all of the things, including, thinking about my mom and thinking about our relationship prior to her death and, giving myself that same grace, right? Like I did the best I could with the tools I had at the time. So like I was somebody who had been in an active eating disorder for 5 years by the time that she got sick. And then I was in school trying to just get through in a situation that was really bad. Like, did I show up like a model daughter or whatever that looks like? No, probably not. But like, did I do the best I could? I guess I have to think I did. Otherwise, so I think that part of it, and just that giving that grace, I apologized to my dad got remarried a couple years I guess it was three years maybe after. And, we weren't very nice to her, like, and that, I apologized to her. So it's more about like taking responsibility, I think, for my, like I said, just, I think that is one of the things that's been most significant in my own growth.
That is not an easy thing to do either. Like, I just want to acknowledge that. Like, it's really fucking hard for us to take responsibility and to not be the victim.
Yeah.
It's so fucking hard to do that.
It is. Because being the victim feels real comfortable for me.
It's easier.
And like,
it's easier.
Yeah.
Like, woe is me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And self-pity, like it just is, those are really seductive emotions and indulgent emotions. And that's kind of like what I'm working on now is to look at my own thoughts about all the things that are happening. But it's like a practice, right? Like it's like a daily practice to be aware of the thought processes and choose to think something that is maybe not comfortable at first.
Yeah. Dig those new grooves.
Exactly.
Definitely easier to blame other people
100%.
for what happened.
Yeah.
Than actually work through like why you're feeling that way.
Yeah. And then like, even like, I don't know who I'm blaming, but like last night I was thinking about it and I'm just like, I'm just pissed, like at life, at the world, at whoever, like, I don't even know what, but I'm just like, I just want to be like this again. It's not fair. Like that would be kind of like a familiar groove. And it's like, okay, why is it not fair? Like, what's not fair? Is it fair of the things that I've gotten, that I haven't gotten, that I did, that I didn't do? Like, I don't know where I'm going with it, but it's that I think acknowledging that like life isn't fair and everything's a choice.
Yeah, because then it clouds us. Like when I'm in those states, like it clouds everything.
100%.
Because now like whatever somebody's saying to me or any interactions I have become like this heightened like protector in me is like, oh, look for the thing they're doing that's trying to hurt you. When in reality, it's like, are they actually?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I think there is something to be said about like trying to change our minds to see things from a different perspective.
Right. 100%. Or just neutral, right? Like these are just facts.
Yeah. Neutral would be a huge bonus.
Yeah. Like just that it's like, it's just neutral. Like it's not like, that person who didn't smile, like not making it mean something,
right?
Not making it mean anything that like, that fact happened. Like it literally has no meaning until we think about it and we make it mean something.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, applying judgments to everything.
Right. Exactly.
Positive, negative. Exactly. Like what if things just were, things would be a lot different in life, but again, really hard to do. Bringing it back to your mom and your relationship with her, something we do ask try to ask every guest is, are there rituals or things you have in your life that you do to connect with her?
No, you know what? I think about my mom a lot. I talk about her a lot. I think about what she would say. And a lot of it is funny because she was a kind of like, she was an interesting person. She had a lot of opinions about a lot of different things. But one of the things that I want to do more is open to the idea of connection. So like I've had maybe one dream. I mean, we're talking like 30, 35 years, but I don't have the signs. I don't have all that shit that everybody has.
Same here.
Which pisses me off also, by the way.
Me too. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I don't really have any rituals. I mean, we talk about her quite a bit as a family, especially as the grandchildren get born. My father will say a lot, your mother would be so proud, or, it's not like, it's like we're in like full on denial, like nobody, it's very much like everybody acknowledges how important she was to the family and how much of a legacy that she has left. And, certainly I think whenever I say something or do something that reminds me of her, I mean, that's how I think, that's what I'll say. Oh my God, my mom, would say this or would say that. I think the one thing that's really difficult right now is that my dad, losing his memory, he doesn't remember anything. So it's kind of like our childhood is like, he barely remembers. I found this recording of her doing a cassette for her mom and dad. And it was such a trip to hear her voice. And it was nice, really nice. And I sent it to my sisters and my brother, and we were all just like, whoa, because we don't have as much, there wasn't as a lot of video or like, we just have pictures. And I mean, I'm making it sound like it's like 1800s, but like, it was,
I feel like I didn't have that.
We had to sit for 20 minutes for our picture.
I had this old tintype, but anyway, I played it for my dad, and he like couldn't remember. He just didn't. He didn't remember. I mean, and that is another. It's an interesting another kind of death, right? Because like he's forgetting. He doesn't. Which is interesting. Like I don't even know where I was going with that, but. No, not a lot of rituals other than I think about her a lot. I definitely think about her a lot. And I think it's just sad, it's just so sad that she was, you know, she was really young. She was only like 56, right? I mean, that's so young. Like I thought it was super old when I was, but it's not, you know, it's like, shit, man. It just isn't fair. Like I'm saying, like, it's not fair to me. I'm like, fuck, it's not fair to her. Like she, like that, it's not fair to your wife. It wasn't fair to your mom. Like, it's just not fucking fair. Like, that's just the bottom line.
And then you're coming up to that age when your mom
I beg your pardon.
Is there any feelings?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to do quick math. I didn't know how to say it sensitively, but like I know Ashley mentioned before she crossed that age. Like, and I remember like getting older than my wife. Like,
yeah.
Is there feelings that come up with that?
You know,
of getting close to her age?
I haven't known.
Well, she's like, no, but now.
No, you know what? It's weird you say that because my sister said something like that the other day because she, I think, well, no, she's past my mom's age. I don't know why she was saying it. I haven't thought about it, and I'll tell you why. Because when I went out to Yellowstone for the summer, I was out there, and it was fun, and it was, you know, partying and all of this stuff. And then we were supposed to come back home, and then go to the mountains to work, whatever. And I came back home, and I had this mole on my chest, and the doctor was like, "Oh, well, we'll just scrape it off." And so this is maybe the year after she died. And he fucking calls me and he's like, "Oh, it's a malignant melanoma." And I was just like, what? Yeah. And so I had to have this like Mohs surgery where they cut out like a big piece of like my skin. And it was on her left breast that she got breast cancer. And then this was on the left side of my chest. And I was just like,
no
you gotta be
way.
fucking kidding me. And anyway, all that to say that I'm just like, I feel like I've had all the bad things happen to me, like in the first part of my life. Yeah. And I'm just like, no, that's nothing. No, yeah. I'm not.
You're in the clear now.
I feel like I kind of am. I mean, I knock wood, but like, I refuse to imagine that anything, I mean, I try to take good care of myself. Like now I do, you know, but no, I don't have the same. My life is so different. Like, I don't know. I just don't have the same feeling that I'm worried. Ashley, did you say you are or you're not?
Oh no, I'm not worried. I just think it's like, I think like you said, like, even though I knew like her dying at like 31.
She was 31.
32. Yeah. She died a month before her 32nd birthday. I think it was. She was born in 1969 and died in 2002. Yeah. So I just think it's like weird that like, I think about like where she was in her life with like 4 kids and like obviously breast cancer and married and like things like that. And I'm like, Jesus, like I'm going to be 31 in January. And like, I mean, I have a boyfriend, but like I don't have 4 kids. I got 2 dogs. Yeah. So I just think about like, I do think about the differences. I don't really like worry so much about like, I mean, I think I have more of like I'm just going to get breast cancer because like everyone I know has gotten it and like, but it's like, test, it's not
right.
Yeah. I don't have like the gene for it, but that doesn't mean that it just means that basically my family is fucking unlucky and we all get it anyways, even though there's no gene. Yeah. So I am very like, I don't know, like I've accepted, like, it's like, it's not a matter of like, and I'm not scared about it. I'm just like, I'm going like every 6 months to do like, you know, MRI and mammograms and all that shit. Like, and like, I don't know if I definitely, like, I'm not saying I will, I'm just saying if I do, it will not be a surprise to me. Like, I will just be like, this was no surprise. Like, I knew I was going to get this, almost like it's not a matter of when. It's not a matter of if, but when. But yeah, I mean, I guess maybe some people would be like, it's probably fucked up or something wrong with that. Like, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like lately there's things that I'm just like, you know, like it sucks that like life does look different than like my friends who have their moms, but I don't know. They always say it is what it is in London. And I just like, I do kind of go back to that. Like, this is what my story looks like. It looks different, but it's not wrong. It's not bad. It's like, but I think, I mean, that was long-winded to say. Like, I think it was just like, wow, I'm the age she was like, and I think about all the things that I've already done and like all the things I could do. And like, that's when, like you said, it wasn't fair to her that her life was cut short.
Mm-hmm.
you know, it wasn't fair to everyone in our life who knew her that her life was cut short, but like it really fucking wasn't fair to her. So I think the one thing I struggle with the most lately is more like, am I the way I am because she died and like that trauma, or is it just like who I am? Like, because I think there's
to both.
Like there's so many things where like, you know, like so my sister was like, you don't talk about your feelings, and I was like, well, first of all, I have a fucking podcast where I literally tell people my feelings. So I feel like I talk about my feelings. But also,
we call bullshit on that.
Yeah. It's like, just because.
I mean, you have for the past year, but okay.
No, but like, I talk about my feelings with everyone? No, but like, I find ways to talk about how I'm feeling. You know what I mean? Like, so I think there's like this, like, there's two, like, I do wonder like a lot when I like do something and I'm like, is that because she died, or is that because like, you know, something else happened and like that's like that, you know, the reason.
Doesn't matter.
No,
doesn't matter.
Well, I don't know. I guess it's just like trying to like, isn't that what you do in therapy? Is like try to figure out what triggers you and like why. Like,
I mean, you should go and you can find out what you do in therapy.
Everyone is like, I've spent a lot of money on my therapist. They're enjoying a good life. I got the podcast, so.
That's funny.
No, people should go to therapy if they want to go to therapy. I'm all about people going to therapy. But yeah, so I do wonder like if that was the reason why I am the way I am sometimes.
Well, I guess
and I'm not saying it's a bad thing or good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on whether that thing that you're talking about, and I don't know what that is, but like whether that's something that you feel like is a issue, is having any sort of negative repercussions.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
If it's just being self-aware, you know, like maybe not, you know, it's impossible to say whether that would be that way or not, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's more like, I think I definitely resonate with like having like more empathy for people. Like the other day I was talking to a friend and he was like, do you have anxiety, or are you just like really empathetic to people that have it? And I was like, I think I'm just empathetic to people who are like, I think I'm just empathetic. And I think we've talked about before, like where like if someone doesn't answer, you're like, my brain, like I feel like in not any situation, I think I always go to the worst case scenario. Like my brain just goes to the worst case scenario. Like my friend and I were literally just texting about it today. She lost her mom in the last year. And like, I sometimes have my phone on focus mode so that I don't fucking look at it every day or every second of the day. And she's like, you know, I can't put it on focus mode, like, because when she was sick, like I was worried I was going to miss a phone call. And I was like, I feel a little bit similar. Like, you know, like I have people that can like get through the focus barrier, you know, like, cause like if Nate is going to like, I just like, I would not want to miss that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what the fuck he could ever have to say. Like that would be a bad thing. But so I like, that's where I'm like, is that because, but it wasn't like I got a text that was like, she's dead. Like, so it's really not that. It's just that I think that the worst thing is going to happen because it has happened in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think my also desire to like figure out like which part of me is that is like, then you have like people like some of my friends are like really into zodiacs or whatever, horoscopes. And they're like, oh, that's because you're a Capricorn. I'm like, the fuck? Is it really? Like, is it you know, like, I think it's just who I am.
That's funny.
I don't think that's anything to do with that. But who knows? I don't know.
Who knows? I mean, the thing I'm looking at now is all about how it's like, it's all about our thoughts. Like, it's all about our thoughts. And I think, because I mean, that's the one thing that's giving me a little bit of like hope is that, you know, if I think, oh, this is just the way I am, then there's nothing that can change. But if I think, okay, well, the reason that I'm feeling this way is because I'm thinking this thought, you know, even if I'm thinking the thought, it's not fair. And then I feel hopeless or helpless or whatever. Like, for some reason, that model is helping me, again, have some agency or respond, you know, take some responsibility.
Yeah, I agree completely.
But trust me, it's not always what I want to do. A lot of times I just want to be like, no, it's this thing that happened or this thing. And that's why, like, and that doesn't, but then if that's the case, then we're completely powerless. Like then what happened when, you know, I was 20, when you were 9, when, you know, with your wife, like that's that then. Like,
it's powerful though, right?
Yeah.
To know that like just because our thoughts originate from us does not mean they're true.
Right.
Because if those thoughts were repeated back to us, it'd be like, what the fuck are you talking 100%. About? But it's so hard.
Yeah.
So before we let you go, last question that we ask everybody, what advice would you give to somebody who went through what you went through and was in your shoes?
Oh gosh. I think I would give the advice to, have you ever heard that thing like pick your hard? Like you can either have it be hard now or hard later. That's the kind of thing I'm thinking about. It's like, if you feel like you're going to lose, 2 years from 20 to 22 or 22 to 24, and that's going to be such a disaster. Like, trust me, you will rather do that than be fucking 40 and still dealing with shit.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Day After. You can find this podcast and more at our website at www.thedayafter.com. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you take a moment to leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast.